Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the January 31st, 2022 Grants Pass City Council Workshop. We made it through January already. And we have Councilor Frazier on the phone, so everybody is present today. We have, we're starting off the morning with some interviews of commission and committee candidates. And I have a list of questions. Do you have the list of questions? Would you guys like to ask the questions, or would you like me to ask the questions?
I did have one question that's not on there that I needed to ask.
Okay, well, you'll be able to ask afterwards if you have your own question. Normally, in the past, we had selected, I guess, some things to ask, but I didn't review them in advance, so I apologize for that. But I guess you guys aren't too excited about asking the questions yourself, so yes, Vanessa?
Just so that you don't have to make this decision by yourself up here. I have no preference one way or the other if we take turns or if you ask them yourself.
Okay, so how about I will ask 5 questions and then you guys can ask follow-up questions? Want to do that? Okay. Let me real quickly read through these questions that are in front of me. Okay, so we have Cynthia Sherratt on the phone, and we'll have you go first. Cynthia, can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can, thank you. So we're going to spend up to 10 minutes with each candidate, and I will ask the first 5 questions, and then we'll open it up to the council to see if they have any follow-up questions. So first, can you please describe the role of the Hbsc Commission and that of a commissioner?
I have friends on the commission. I've known Arden McConnell for many, many years. And I really respect what the commission does. I live in a historic house on a historic street. And I really like to see that facet of our community preserved and the history known to the community and to the people who even live in those houses. At the moment, I'm getting a brand new neighbor moving in, and I can't get my car out of my driveway because their moving van's parked across my driveway. So it would be nice to be able to introduce the person to their house and the history of their house and the history of the street and the history of the other houses and streets in this community. And so I assume that is something that the commission does. I've been on committees, and committees are different than commissions, and commission has more power. It's not advisory like the committees, and it's actually quite a strong force for the tasks that have been assigned to it by the city and the council, and listens very strongly to what the commission has to say and their ideas. Did I answer the question?
Yes, you did. Thank you. What useful experience, knowledge, or perspective would you bring to the commission?
Well, I live in a historic house that was researched by the Historical Society and was on tour, one of the houses on a tour that they gave some years ago. I'm a researcher. I'm an instructor at the college, and I have done research for authors and professors writing books and stuff like that. So I could be an asset that I know how to research and find information, especially today with all the new sources we have for finding information. You don't go to a historical society, you go into the attic or the basement and unpack boxes to find out information. You sit down with a computer and you pull up things you didn't even know existed from places you didn't even know exist for that purpose. I really like what the commission is doing. I think it's really important to protect our history and to be proud of it and to know what it is.
Thank you. What do you see as important issues of preservation that confront us in the next few years, and why are they important?
Well, especially on my street, there is a murmur going around that we're going to be declared a historic district. And that comes with some challenges, having talked to people who come from historic districts and housing and what they could and couldn't do. And so that's going to be a challenge to get the idea of what a historic district means and what the qualifications and the things you have to do to be part of that or to stay part of it. So that's education is important, educating the people whose houses and the community at large. Research is important, getting all the facts and figures and everything right, understanding the rules and the bylaws and all of that, and being able to clearly explain them to not just the homeowners, but to the community.
Thank you. How do you see the relationship between historic preservation and economic development?
That's one of the challenges, because I have a lot and a half, not just one lot, and I have a really big backyard, and people are coming to me to ask if they could buy my house because they want to build apartments in the back. And we are zone 1-6. And that's going to be a challenge not just for me, but to, that was what your question is. Yeah, there's going to be a need for more housing. There's going to be a need to preserve the housing we have that are historical and keep them in a certain condition to show their historicness. And the older houses are generally in the city center, not in the urban growth boundary. There are farmhouses there, but the really historic houses, I'm sitting here in my living room looking out at, the Washington Inn and across the street. And, there's going to be challenges. And as we get a larger population, and people here have said that they like the historicness of the city, and the new people need housing. It's going to be a very interesting time coming up for the city, and really all cities.
Thank you. And what is the most important skill for a historic building and sites commissioner to have?
I think a real interest in history and the ability to share that history and that specialness with the community.
Thank you.
And in preserving things too.
And with that, I will turn it over to the council for any questions they may have. Rick?
Cynthia, thank you for applying. Are there any improvements, building structures or signs in areas you feel are especially suitable for candidates, the building, for historic preservation designation?
There are a lot of hoops to jump through to be a historic house. And I think that is the first thing to get across to the homeowner before they even apply or the committee goes out to solicit, to have a checklist of what exactly they need to have done or not have done with their homes. And if people want to apply, it needs to be really clear-cut steps, and that they don't get caught up in red tape. I've been on other committees, like the tree committee, and they wanted to preserve the tree, and they ran into so much red tape about it, and it went on, and people were very frustrated. So you have to be really clear, simple, easy to understand steps, and to stand behind the person who's going through the process.
Thank you.
Other questions? Joel?
Cynthia, this is Joel King. Thank you for applying. You have a good reputation and you have good credentials, and it's great to have people like you in our city. It was my understanding, it was before my time, that on some previous committee meetings, we had some attendance issues. Without invading your private circle, do you anticipate such problems in the future? Or whatever, and I don't know how you would address that question.
I live about 2 blocks from the council chambers, so that's not a big problem for me. And with COVID, we've sort of gotten a lot of different ways of attending a meeting that's not just in person, and to have a person participate in the meeting, kind of like we're doing right now, is one of them. Let's see, code.
Cynthia, do you anticipate then that you can attend the meetings regularly?
That's my goal.
Okay. Thank you.
Rob?
Yeah, thank you for applying, Cynthia, and I really appreciate the thoughtfulness of all your answers so far. I think what I think Joel may have been getting at it, if not, I'm going to get to it, is that I know that some of the councilors were concerned that we actually had a vote in front of us a few months ago where we had to unfortunately, I guess, replace you or, take you off a committee that you were on due to attendance issues. And again, without necessarily prying into your personal affairs, I know that was a concern of mine and some of the other counselors because we did have that issue with your attendance before. So I guess I'd like to hear kind of an acknowledgement that if I have it right, I think we actually had to remove you due to attendance issues, and we want to know that those specific, because at that time you still could have attended virtually and so forth, but we want to know that to appoint you again, that we're not going to run into the same issues, whatever they may have been. Can you speak to that, please?
I had an accident and fell and broke my arm very, very severely and had a very bad concussion. And I couldn't drive for 4.5 months with my arm in a sling and physical therapy. Physical therapy actually went on for a year. And that's the reason I didn't attend. I called in to most of the meetings and sort of thought that they realized that that's what was going on with me. Still, I'm fine now. I'm going to go back to the gym and continue my exercise regime that I had before I fell.
Yeah.
So I plan on attending the meetings.
Well, thank you for that. And
there's no more moving trucks parking in my driveway.
well, thank you for that explanation, because all of that wasn't really communicated to council, but I appreciate your elaborating on that. Thank you.
And thank you for getting that question out there so it would be answered.
All right, Cynthia, thank you for being with us today, and we are planning on making a decision about these at our meeting on Wednesday night. So we will let you know one way or the other. And,
Thank you very much for considering me and for this interview.
all right, thank you for applying. We definitely appreciate that. Next up, Linda Cole. Are you here today, Linda? All right. Make sure that microphone is on. Okay. So Linda, we have, I'm going to be asking 5 questions, and then we'll open it up to the council if they have any follow-up questions, and we have about 10 minutes with you.
Okay.
Can you please describe the role of the Historic Building Sites Commission and that of a commissioner?
Well, the purpose of it is to maintain and, keep the historic aspects of the downtown area intact, and to make sure that the buildings and the sites stay as they are, to keep them in their natural state, to restore and retain their natural qualities and historic values.
Thank you. And what useful experience, knowledge, or perspective would you bring to the commission?
I love old. What do I want to say? I own the Dimmick Judson house, which is the oldest house still standing in Grants Pass. And I have been lovingly restoring it. And I love our downtown area. I grew up here. I moved away for a while after school for college and raising kids, but I always wanted to move back. And I love Grants Pass, and I love going downtown and being part of the merchants, and just being able to keep it intact and keep it restored would just make me just thrilled.
What do you see as important issues of preservation that confront us in the next few years, and why are they important?
There have been a lot of people coming in and wanting to develop in our area, even some of the buildings surrounding, I guess you'd say, downtown. And it always hurts when I see a building get tore down. And I don't want to have that happen as much. If we can keep as many homes intact and buildings that are here, because a lot of them have historic value to them, that would be my main goal and purpose. That's what I would want to do, is to try and keep everything, from being torn down, trying to keep things restored and keep things as they are and preserve them.
Thank you. How do you see the relationship between historic preservation and economic development?
They can go hand in hand, because a lot of the downtown buildings have been turned into businesses that are thriving downtown, and a lot of people like going to those businesses, the restaurants, the shops, the everything that's down there, just because it has so much character to it. It's not like a lot of downtowns. They've either been not embraced by their community, or they've been, replaced with other buildings. Ours has been kept intact, and it adds to our attraction as a town. And I think it adds to the economy because people love to come here.
Thank you. What is the most important skill for an HBSC commissioner to have?
To want to be part of our community, to help, and to keep things growing, instead of being stagnant, to keep things growing and to just be able to interact with the community, interact with the businesses, interact with the goals of the city, and work together as a community and as a committee.
Thank you. And with that, I will turn it over to the council for any questions they may have. Rick?
Thank you, Linda. Do you think there are any improvements to buildings or signs that would be suitable candidates for historic preservation?
You mean any in specific right now, or?
Well, just when you walk around town, are there certain sites you see, oh, that would be a great candidate?
I don't know. I can't think of anything off the top of my head because I just enjoy when I'm going around and it encompasses a lot of the external areas, not just 6th Street, which is nice because it's expanded over time. And so there's a lot more that it encompasses, but I just like going around and I know there are places off of 6th Street that need to be better promoted, I would say, because of all the things that are enriched the community that are not just on 6th Street.
Thank you.
Council, do you have any other questions? Valerie?
Hello, Linda, and thank you for applying. I'm going to simply ask, if you are selected as a HBSC commissioner, what are goals that you would like to accomplish during your term? So what are some goals that you see?
To make people better aware of the committee, what it does, what it entails, what it can bring to the city and to the community, so that way there's more involvement. Because right now I don't think a lot of people even know about the committee around town, and it would be nice to have more interaction with outside areas, not just the downtown merchants and stuff, and just be able to, I guess, get more involvement.
All right. I think that wraps up our questions for today. Thank you for being here, and we will be making a decision Wednesday night, and we will let you know one way or the other if you've been appointed. But thank you for applying and being here today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right. Next up, we also have some interviews for our city budget committee. I'm going to take just a quick minute here to pick out a few questions. All right. We have three candidates here today, and so our first is Jay Meredith. So I will go ahead and just start us off again by asking a few questions, and then if the council has anything to follow up, we'll just follow that same format. Hi, Jay.
Hi. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Good to see you all again.
The Budget Committee typically meets at least 4 times in May on Tuesday and Thursday nights. Additionally, throughout the year, there may be special meetings, typically on a Wednesday, at which your attendance would be beneficial. Are you able to make this time commitment?
Yes, no problem.
What is the most important financial issue facing the city, and why is it important?
Well, I'll call out 2, even though you may only be looking for 1. And I did put this in on my application when I submitted my Budget Committee application last year. The two main financial specific issues facing the city, I think, are funding for public safety and funding for infrastructure, largely public works infrastructure. And so I always feel like when we look at the city financially and we make decisions, those should be front and center in our decision-making processes. And so as such, I was very glad to hear that the council seems to be placing a high priority on investigating permanent funding for public safety.
Thank you. What is the greatest asset that you can bring to the City of Grant's past Budget Committee?
Well, I think my many years of experience in budget-related things, specifically with the city. I did work for the city for 12 years, and 10 of those was as the finance director, so I spent a lot of time helping the city coordinate the process, helping the council and the management team of the city work together to allocate our resources in the way that best meets the city's goals and the council's goals. So I understand very well the process we go through and the process that the budget committee goes through specifically to analyze our budget and to make sure we have a responsible budget. So my experience is probably the greatest asset, but I've also grown very fond of the city over the years, and so I just like to serve the city in any way that I can, in any way where I can add some value, and budget is one of those ways where I can do that.
Thank you. This next question may duplicate a bit, but what specific contributions do you hope to make?
Well, I hope to just make sure that the resources the city has are allocated in ways that can most effectively meet the council's goals. The budget committee process is not the place to make policy for the city, and I recognize that. But I think having many years seeing how it all comes together, specifically with the city's budget process, I think I can offer some ideas for the council and for the management team to consider in ways that allocate our resources to most effectively meet the council's goals and the city's goals. And I don't necessarily think that the budget will be proposed to you in ways that need to be changed. That doesn't normally happen, but what often comes out of the budget process when we have an engaged budget committee is budget committee members will offer some advice for council to consider that doesn't necessarily relate to changing the budget, but advice for the council and the management team to consider in, hey, when you do this project or you attack this council goal, here's some things for you to consider as you go about achieving those goals throughout the year. So I think that's one thing that I can be helpful in.
And the expectation of budget committee members is that they do their homework prior to the meetings by familiarizing themselves with the allocation of resources and the strategic plan. How do you feel about this expectation?
I think that's a very reasonable expectation. In fact, if appointed, I would request what we used to do, and that is I'd like to see a line item budget, which that's not the level of detail that your average budget committee member gets into, but I'd like to see a line item budget so I can avoid having to ask too many questions during the budget process. I can answer some questions by reviewing just the line item budget that goes into the summary budget that the budget committee spends the most time with. So I think I would spend a fair amount of time looking at even finer detail than your average budget committee member, and I'll be prepared for the meetings as a result.
Thank you, and with that, I will turn it over to council. Do you have any follow-up questions? Rob?
Yeah, thanks, Jay. You just touched on, I've a couple questions, but permanent funding for public safety is a kind of a top priority for council. Anything off the top of your head jump out as far as any ideas you might have for that?
Well, my main piece of advice, without knowing exactly what types of permanent funding you may want to look at, my main advice at this point would be jump on that immediately, because the next levy is going to come up before you know it. If it's something that ends up needing to go to the ballot, or the council is choosing to send it to the ballot for citizens to vote on, you're going to need at least 2 years between now and when it goes to the ballot to effectively study that option and communicate that option so that voters understand what they're voting on. That's a minimum 2-year process, and given the length of the levy, I would start on that project yesterday.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? All right, thank you for being here and for applying for the committee. We will also be making a decision on this one Wednesday night, so we'll let you know one way or the other.
Thank you. Have a great day and a great budget season.
Thank you. All right, next in line we have Tammy Schmidt-Kirk. Okay.
Hello.
Hello, Tammy. Thank you for being with us today. So I'm over here going to ask the first 5 questions, and then we will open it up to the council if they have any follow-up questions. We have about 10 minutes to spend with you. And if you want to take your mask off for clarity, you can, but you don't need to.
Now I can breathe.
So first question, the Budget Committee typically meets at least 4 times in May on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. Additionally, throughout the year, there may be a special meeting, typically on a Wednesday, at which your attendance could be beneficial. Are you able to make such a time commitment?
Yes.
All right. Then we jump into the meat here. What is the most important financial issue facing the city, and why is it important?
That's an interesting question. I'm interested in the Budget Committee to learn more about the city and the financial aspects of it. So I wouldn't know how to answer that, but I was wanting to learn and understand more.
Thank you. What is the greatest asset that you can bring to the city's Budget Committee?
I would say my financial background, and I've worked in finance, IT, been a manager and director for Southern Oregon Aspire for 15 years. I've worked as a controller for Hunter Communications, and I own and operate my own bookkeeping and accounting business now.
And what specific contributions do you hope to make?
I hope to learn more about the finances of the city and help navigate the budget process as best I can as I learn. I'm hoping that it brings light to light things that are going on in the city. I became interested in understanding all of that, so I'm really interested to dive into the numbers and see how it operates and what happens. I have done lots of nonprofit accounting, so city or government accounting makes sense to me because of nonprofit fund accounting.
Thank you. The expectation of budget committee members is that they do their homework prior to meetings by familiarizing themselves with the allocation of resources and the strategic plan. How do you feel about this expectation?
I think that's hugely important. If you don't understand what the plan is, how can you understand how the numbers make sense? So it's important to understand the strategic plan and understand what's going on in all aspects to understand why the numbers the way they are.
Thank you. Council, do you have any follow-up questions? Valerie?
Yes. Thank you for applying. Always like to see new faces. So what did I have here? First I'll ask, do you have experiences in group processes and decision-making? Because working with a group and stepping forward and giving your feedback.
Yeah, so I was a director at Southern Oregon Aspire for 15 years. And in that group process for the people with developmental disabilities, we had to meet to help them to navigate and make decisions. So it was always around group process and understanding what the needs of the individual were and making that happen for them.
Thank you.
Vanessa?
Thank you, Tammy, for coming today. Please describe your knowledge of the city of Grants Pass.
Well, I've lived in the city of Grants Pass for 22 years. I'm not political, so I don't get involved in the governmental things. So that's kind of why I wanted to learn about city budgeting and finance. It's a beautiful, wonderful place to live, and I'm interested in making sure that it stays that way, but I don't have a political agenda in that. I know lots, but I don't know exactly what you're looking for.
Whatever comes to your mind is the
Okay.
answer I'm looking for.
I love living here. It's a great place. I'm involved in Rotary. Know lots of people here, and lots of people in different businesses, and I want to see my city stay the beautiful place that it is. So that's why I'm interested.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I think that's probably all the questions we have. I'm not seeing any hands. We will be making a decision about committee appointments on Wednesday night at our business meeting, and we will let you know one way or the other. But we thank you for applying and for being with us today, and your interest in learning more about the city of Grants Pass. It's wonderful.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And our next interviewee is Josh Bellick. Hi, Josh, welcome. A little bit of housekeeping here. If you want to take off your mask for clarity, you can. You're not under any obligation to do that. I will be asking the first 5 questions, and then we'll open it up to the council if they have any further questions, and we have about 10 minutes to spend with you.
Terrific, thank you.
So first up, the Budget Committee typically meets at least 4 times in May on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. Additionally, throughout the year, there may be a special meeting, typically on a Wednesday, at which your attendance would be beneficial. Are you able to make this time commitment?
I am absolutely able to.
All right, that's what we want to hear. What is the most important financial issue facing the city, and why is it important?
I think the number one financial issue that's facing the city, and it's pretty much any municipality or any government, is long-term sustainable funding of whatever project that you're doing. In particular, at these times, as the city is looking to expand, and we've got all sorts of new programs and new things that are coming in, we don't want to set up programs that are specifically designed to only be 2 or 3 years, because not only does that not really help address the problems that we need to address, but it also furthers this distrust that tends to come out of government, where essentially we kind of start something and then that becomes a problem later. So that would be the number one thing that I think we need to focus on and make sure is part of any kind of budget strategy going forward.
Thank you. What is the greatest asset that you can bring to the city's budget committee?
My day job is I'm actually a registered lobbyist, and I work very closely with a lot of state agencies and state government types of things. And I think I can be somebody who can bring in a perspective where to show, look, this is what's going on at the state. Maybe we can leverage that opportunity to be able to do something more sustainable down here, or even find other opportunities to partner with the state or other funders to be able to make sure that we've got long-term sustainability for whatever we're working on.
Thank you. This question duplicates a bit, but what specific contributions do you hope to make?
I think a perspective from where there are other opportunities to leverage dollars. I would also I'm also a parent. I'm also somebody who is really invested in trying to make this a community that everyone is able to succeed in. And that's really the other thing that I want to make sure that that's part of all those decision-making processes, because budgets really are a reflection of what your priorities are as a community, and I want to help be a part of that.
Thank you. And the expectation of the budget committee members is that they do their homework prior to meetings by familiarizing themselves with the allocation of resources and the strategic plan. How do you feel about this expectation?
Yes, absolutely. That should be part of your job, is to do your homework. In fact, I even took a look at the budget, got an idea of where the current budget is, that you have about 240 FTE, that the general operating budget for the general fund's around $44 million. So, just taking a look and making sure that you've got kind of the basics. But yeah, but when you start dealing with budgets, it is a much more complex funding structure than just money in, money out, because often there's leveraging pieces, and you have to understand how leveraging dollars can actually impact the long-term sustainability of whatever program that you're doing. So that's something I think is vitally important to be successful in budgeting.
Thank you. And with that, I will turn it over to council. Do you have any other questions? Joel?
I thank you for applying. I have a lot of respect for the company that you work for, and your job as a lobbyist at the state level is obviously needed by your employer, and it helps the medical community here in Grants Pass. One of the things that we all do, we all operate in different circles, and sometimes those circles are coincident, and they cover the same subject area, and other times they're not, and they work against each other. And so in the budget, you have the circle of the citizens of Grants Pass and their interests. And in the circle of all care, you have the financial interests of the company plus their mission, which is a lot of overlap with some of the city's priorities. In those areas where there is a conflict, how do you resolve those in your mind in terms of being on the budget committee?
I mean, first and foremost, I am not coming in as a member of All Care. I am coming in as a member of the city of Grants Pass. My duty and my representation and my experience and perspective will be to serve you and the budget committee to the best ability possible. And I have dealt a lot with conflicts and these types of things through my professional job, and it's always be as transparent as humanly possible, be as clear about things, and if there's any question, in my opinion, that is a place where you can take 2 steps back and say, look, I may be conflicted, this is an issue, and just not vote or not participate, but to be as clear and concise and as transparent as possible is the only way you can deal with those types of conflicts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? All right, thank you, Josh. We will be making a decision on Wednesday night at our business meeting, and we will let you know one way or the other. And we thank you for applying and for your time coming down today and participating in the process here.
Thank you very much to all of you.
All right, council, that is the end of our interviews. Next up on the agenda, we are going to hear about the Destination Marketing Organization's annual business plan. And Tori, the new director, is here to present.
Is it on with a red light? Yeah. Hi, Mayor and Council. Thank you so much for letting me have some time to come in and talk about our first marketing and business plan. It's an interesting time because as we went over the city contract, Aaron and Bradley and I, typically a plan would be submitted in December. I would probably present in January, but we're kind of off on this kind of in this ambiguous year where I'm kind of presenting and trying to build some transparency of the current fiscal year we're working in and help guide you and understand how this year is going to move into the next fiscal year. Since I only started in November, which was nearly halfway through the fiscal year already. So I am the executive director of Josephine County Visitors Association. We are currently doing business as Travel Grants Pass. So today I'm going to keep it a little bit high level of who we are, the goals we're working towards this fiscal year, our overall budget, some of the quick wins we've already had, and how that's going to look for fiscal year 22-23. Everyone should have a copy of the presentation and the larger business plan at your desk there, and hopefully you got it electronically before today. So again, just a reminder, we're working to serve Grants Pass and Josephine County visitor industry by inspiring and driving visitation. As we work from this lens, what we're hoping to do is stabilize the visitor industry. You have a very busy summer season. We'd like to not see that just turn off at a certain point and extend the season, have less of a shoulder, less of an off season, so it's more of a year-round engine for the community. In these wild 2 years of COVID, managing visitor expectations is really important of a DMO, and also protecting the local livability, and that can be done in several different ways. From if we have good communication with land management agencies, if we hear, for example, Cathedral Hills trailheads are just overwhelmed, please stop talking about it. Let's talk about alternatives and try and redistribute some of those visitors around. So those are kind of the things that we'll be thinking about as we work on our plans. And of course, we want to be a part of the development of the destination and the visitor experiences. Some of that development can help build on the shoulder and off season to make it a more visitable location. And we have the beautiful wild and scenic Rogue River, but we don't want to be only one asset. And so we just want to make sure that we have a wide variety of experiences here, which we do already and can continue to build upon. Just a quick list of our board representation. Councilor Lovelace is our city liaison, and Commissioner Fowler, who's also here in the room today, is our county liaison, and I believe I saw Meadow with the mayor of Cave Junction here today to also listen in on our plan. I was just Friday in Cave Junction, the Illinois Valley, kind of on a tour, learning about their experiences there. And just a quick reminder too that based on council suggestion, we do have a minimum representation of 2 downtown businesses, which is currently Sydney Mitchell of Shoe Fly and Hyla Lipson of the Grants Pass Art Museum. So some of our initial goals during this fiscal year is really to create a 3 to 5 year business plan. We're basically a business startup. Our board needs to go through a strategic planning process, set direction, mission, vision, and have some goals that we can stitch our 1 year fiscal years together over a broader overarching plan, not unlike what you guys have been doing with the city here. We need to go through and audit the old assets from the visitor guide, website, social media, and also set direction with them and find ways to update and get those back out into the community and out to the visitors. We want to build a year-round video and photo library, so it's a lot easier to show the full seasonality of this community here. And continue to build collaborative relationships with our neighboring DMOs like Travel Ashland and Travel Medford, as well as Travel Southern Oregon, who's the regional entity that sits between us and Travel Oregon. So looking really high level by department in our budget, the budget is projected at $593,763. The fourth quarter payment is a makeup payment, so based on collections, it can go up or down based on the actual collections of the year. And you have had a very good year, so I expect that to actually go up. I kind of broke it up by Department of General Administration, our marketing programs, strategic partnerships, which is sort of tourism language for your association memberships and continuing education and how you continue to be a part of the greater ecosystem. Global sales, which is the international buying chain, and then contingency is a sort of a safety net bucket. We're a first-year organization. We don't have a lot of historical context on certain costs of doing business, and so this gives us a little bit of a safety net if we are under budgeted or some sort of surprise. Hopefully we don't have to use the word pivot at all this year, but if that were to happen, we have some money there to help us in that effort. Also within the admin line, you'll see there's a reserve line, and that covers 3 months of hard costs, which is also part of the city contract, that we have a 3-month operating reserve withheld in case there's some sort of weird thing in the world that affects our funding. So this kind of digs deeper into the marketing bucket as far as individual tactics and how we're spending. If you're not familiar with the term FAM, it's a shortened word for the familiarization tour. Oftentimes in public relations, you bring writers actually into the community. They experience firsthand, they write about it, and that's how you get pieces and things like Travel and Leisure and those sorts of publications. You'll also see that I'm budgeting a FAM tour for the Ashland Welcome Center. It's the Gateway Welcome Center for anyone driving on I-5 into our state. And I really want to make sure that that staff, who is likely residents of Ashland, is actually aware of what there is to do here. It's not that far of a way of a community, but I have noticed the cross-pollination of the community is not as strong as maybe it could be. So, and any extra in that budget line will go into the PR FAM tours. We want to reprint and redo some of the visitor materials. Also distribute our visitor guide to all of the welcome centers across the state, which includes all of the gateway highways into the state, the Portland Airport, and then of course we don't want to forget our great regional airports of Medford, Redmond, and Eugene. So Ready campaign. So Ready actually held back CARES Act dollars to support the destination organizations, and so we're working on a collaborative One Rogue Valley marketing campaign, which is with Travel Ashland and Travel Medford, and so this is our commitment in to help kind of expand that marketing buy. As we look towards the marketing goals, again, we want to clean up and update the visitor-facing materials. It's been a tough year for businesses. Sadly, there will have been business attritions we need to update, but also many of you have maybe noticed we have also seen new businesses open, and we want to make sure they're represented in our materials. Get that year-round photo video library. We want to dedicate marketing campaigns really to fall and winter visitation. If occupancy in summer is already in the 90% plus, the return on investment is building where there's more room for occupancy growth. We want to increase participation in the FAM world. Travel Southern Oregon sends writers. We want to support those as well as Travel Oregon. And we are working on contracting a public relations agency to run our own FAMs as well. We're also investing into data platforms so we can identify who's currently visiting here and find low-hanging fruit target segments that we can grow quickly, and then also set some longer-term goals in that space. Again, strategic partnerships is attending conferences and general memberships, which can include the Oregon Restaurant Lodging Association, the Oregon Destination Association. There's a broader group called DMA West, which is about all of the Western destinations working together and kind of working through struggles that is specific to West Coast destinations. Conference attendance could be, and not limited to, but the Travel Oregon Governors Conference on Tourism. We want to make sure that even our local destinations around the state are aware that we're here, that there's an organization again, and they have someone to reach to if they have questions. And just kind of participate in that space and make sure people know we're here. So again, building collaborations, it also includes our local chamber, the Illinois Valley Chamber. And as a strategic partnership, it's really important to build respect and credibility amongst this community. We're a new organization. We serve in a slightly different way than past organizations, which will take some retraining. So we just want to make sure that we can be a respected part of this community, like many of the other great community organizations. Global sales is the international buying chain. I know in the US, working with a travel agent is not very popular across the globe. That's not so much the case. Buying with a travel agent is how international visitors travel. And so attending conferences with those operators and letting them know who we are, what we do, what our hotel packages are, and what our things to do is how you start getting into those operator magazines. The Go West Summit is a global sales conference focused on West Coast destinations. There's a small change to the budget in that I'm not actually able to physically attend the conference this year, but because I was already registered and people had requested appointments, I'm still able to do virtual appointments on my own outside the conference and make sure they know who we are, and working with Travel Oregon to make sure they know our assets, and they'll also share about Grants Pass on our behalf. Also, what will happen was I paid for the registration. They're going to defer that and let me use it next year, so it'll save us money on next year's registration. So again, these initial goals are to establish relationships. In my past position, I was doing the global sales travel for the Willamette Valley, so I have a network, let them all know where I am now and let them know about this great destination. One of the biggest packages that we see on the West Coast are what's called a fly drive, which is where an international visitor will fly into either Seattle or San Francisco and drive to the other airport and stop overnight and do all these experiences on this road trip. We are right in that drive path, and we want to make sure we are one of the overnight selected. So that will be one of my initial goals, is just getting some of that I-5 traffic off and overnight and enjoying this great community. General administration, postage is there. It's kind of being held. Eventually we will, when we have a new visitor guide, we'll be working with the Welcome Center on fulfillment. So when we get individual asks for visitor guides, they have a budget to kind of help ship those individual guides out to anyone trip planning. Subscriptions, tech subscriptions like Dropbox and Zoom, and those things that we kind of need to keep doing business. And again, that reserve is the 3 months hard cost operating. Really, staff and admin, we want to stay in budget. We want to make sure we have clear measurables and reporting structures, which is what we're starting to work on. What I've seen and heard from council is that real SMART goals that are measurable and that you can see those successes will be really important to show how we're being successful. So we'll be working on what that looks like and making sure that you guys have some transparency into our successes. Again, that 3 to 5 year strategic plan to help guide our organization, and then hopefully in the not too distant future, we can start looking for opportunity to grow our staff. So right now it's just me and our board of directors. Some very initial quick wins was we won a Travel Oregon Destination Ready Assessment grant/program. And basically what this is working with collaborative community groups to find projects that are already kind of having movement and help get them ready to be funded by grants. And to put them on a priority list of super shovel ready, need some more development, do they need a feasibility study, and kind of prioritize those projects for the community. Our geography that we're working with is kind of North Valley through Grants Pass and Applegate region. The Illinois Valley also received their own destination assessment, so they'll be kind of working in their own little group, and we're working with Travel Oregon and that group to see if we can get our two groups to work together so that we can build some synergy between the programs. We just selected our marketing and PR agency of record, as well as a consultant to do our strategic planning, so we'll move into that contracting process and start really getting those engines going. We were able to quickly work with a local video and visual company to get some photo and video highlights from the 2021 holiday season so that we have those visual assets ready to promote for 2022, so we're not missing or another year delay of being able to promote all the great things to do in the holidays here. And I'm doing my best to attend many of the city advisory committees that have intersections with tourism. I've been to COPA, CEDC, I have the bike pedestrian pathways, I don't know the exact term, committee on my list, as well as parks, to just try to put my name out there, get my business cards out, and let them know that there will be points of intersections of their work that will also help us and help them. So just trying to work on that cross collaboration there. So as we look to 22 and 23, we want to continue to increase our global sales participation. We want to implement the marketing plans, public relations, social media plans that have been working on this year, which again is a lot of establishing, setting a foundation and strategic direction for us to move forward. We want to be able to consult and help in destination development efforts, even if that's just providing a letter of support for a grant application for community projects. And start in the establishment of baseline data so that I can start coming to you with year-over-year comparisons and we can really see the growth and successes of these programs. Very, very high level, I do sort of have the start of the 22 to 23 budget laid out. I slightly increased it based on collections here, but only up to 600,000, so it's not a huge increase. And just to let you see departmentally, marketing is still the #1 bucket as far as size and spend. And then anything that continues on year to year, if it's under budget this year, we'll move in to that same budget line next year. And we'll be flexible. I hope there's some understanding that the marketing plan is not, it's a living document and it will need to ebb and flow with whatever comes our way. And that's the end of kind of like the real formal of what I wanted to kind of get out to the group. I'm happy to answer questions from either the presentation or the more intensive plan, if anyone has that.
Thank you, Tori. What a lot of work you've done since November here. So gotten off to a good start. We've been talking about the DMO for, it seems like a long time now, and it's exciting to be able to see a plan.
Thank you.
Council, questions? Do you have a question, Joel? Go ahead.
Well, I appreciate you reaching out to us and your one-on-one meetings, and look forward to our meeting tomorrow morning.
Me too, thank you.
That'd be great, and as we move forward. It was a little unclear under the staff and administrative goals. It says look for the opportunity to grow staff capacity, and I know there's something more there than just adding staff. There is the mission, or I know sometimes there's efficiencies. So for example, if my medical provider is out doing the weeding the garden during the day, that's not the highest function they perform in the organization, and they need to perform that function. So in the staff and administrative goals, when you have the look for the opportunity to grow staff capacity, what really are you looking at strategically, not tactically, to do an even better job of?
Yeah, so one thing we do have is a social media contractor who helps manage and run the social media channels, so I don't have to check on that in my day-to-day. We do meet and set content calendars, direction, what's a new blog post, what are we going to pay and promote together, and give her the tools she needs to be successful. And that will also be similar to what our marketing and PR contract will be. They will be helping create the plan and solicit where we're going to invest our marketing dollars, from print ads, digital ads, if it ends up being highway billboards. They'll kind of help identify that based on the target markets we're trying to meet. And that will save me an individual contracting with, am I going to buy 6 months in Alaska Air, or, those sorts of things. They'll help in that capacity space and present. And of course, I can give direction or changes in that space. So then also in the next fiscal year, it'd be nice to increase actual staff at the organization. What exactly that position will be is kind of, we'll see where the need is. Is it in content creation and management? Is it community and development sort of support? That is where I think this next year will really kind of help inform what that is. And then the strategic planning session too will also kind of help identify holes or gaps in the capacity, or where I can or cannot be in serving the community, both Grants Pass and Greater Josephine County as well. Yeah.
Rob.
Yeah, hi, thanks for giving a really great presentation so far.
Thank you.
Awesome. So you mentioned you have a social media contractor, so that kind of takes it off your day-to-day plate. So is that person or that firm, do they reside in Josephine County?
They do, yeah. They live in Josephine County, and they have a gallery in downtown Grants Pass.
So do you intentionally try to reach out to people who are local, or how do you make a choice there?
I do. I do like to hire local first. Also, our website maintenance agreement is with a local website company. The marketing and PR agency will be from outside Josephine County, and part of that is the agency that I could work with one contract to serve both public relation and marketing needs. The only full service agency that applied was outside of the county, and at this time I think that's a better strategic use of that sort of scope of work. But yes, we do try and solicit local first, even in the review process and the score sheet for the marketing and PR agencies. They got 1 additional point if they were Oregon-based and 2 additional points if they were Josephine County-based, so that we were even trying to weight the scale and try and help hire as local as possible.
That's great. And so I know that it was basically your goal and your job probably from the time that you got hired till this moment was to come up with a cohesive, comprehensible presentation for today, because this allows you budgeting for next year and so forth. So I think that we can check that off your box. Did a good job with that.
Thank you.
Probably the rest of the councilors probably agree with me. On the other end of that, what do you like? What kind of vision would you have for what your job is going to be like in 5 years compared to what it was or what it is this year?
Yeah, I mean, in 5 years, I'd like to see a more year-round tourism economy. Hopefully our businesses can hire full-time staff instead of seasonal. Of course, there are seasonal industries like, the permits on the river and stuff that can't change. Eventually, if we show growth and prove ourselves, the interesting thing about starting a destination marketing organization at this time is many DMOs who have been established for quite a while are in this tipping point of like, what's the M? Is it marketing? Is it management? And I sort of don't care about the M. I just consider myself a destination organization. And that means, if it means growing visitation, then that's what we need to do is grow. If it means managing the visitation because it's really high, and the worst thing you can do is have locals turn on the visitor economy, because then they stop being nice to the visitors and visitors won't want to come here. So eventually, in 5 years, we would hopefully be at a place where we've maybe proved ourselves, we can increase our budget, and we can be a part of the funding mechanism that helps in the experience development. Right now, we have a healthy marketing budget, and I appreciate all the work and the amount of trust that this council has put in towards us, and hopefully I can prove myself in this organization. And maybe we can see that grow and help in capacity of the city of, maybe it's not a city staff who's helping in that capacity of visitor experience. Maybe they're staffed at our organization and they have their own pot of money or their own grant money that can even help the community. So that's eventually where I'd like to see us grow, is really serving in that like full service space of being a destination organization.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right.
I think you're making it easy on me because I'm new.
Because you did such a good job and had beautiful pictures of Grants Pass. We're all in awe, so you live in a lovely place.
Thank you.
Council, did you have any follow-up discussion about that before we move on to the next topic? Okay. A lot of times we just have questions and then we have discussion. Today we're not making any decisions about anything, but I wanted to give you the opportunity. Next up, how about Caveman Plaza Task Force?
All right, good morning, Mayor and Council. Brad Clark with Community Development. I am joined today virtually by 2 other presenters. One is Elaine Howard, and Elaine has been involved with the city's Urban Renewal Agency from the get-go. She is on the phone with us today. And then we also have a representative with Sierra Architects, Sierra Design in the Portland area, Martin, and he's also here with us virtually, and he'll be presenting a piece afterwards. But I wanted to start out by just kind of providing you some of the, just a couple of slides in the background of where we are, as well as kind of the financial piece, and maybe just kind of from Community Development Department's perspective, a couple of pieces on the use of consultants for a project like this. So, subject and summary, there's really 2 pieces there. Update the council on the status of the task force formation, and then, as I mentioned, secondly, hearing a proposal from Sierra Architects about the task force framework. And it relates to your council goals in kind of those two main ways: facilitating sustainable, manageable growth, and then providing cooperative shared leadership. I probably didn't need to include this slide since you just talked about this about a month ago, but you in the formation of this task force, this was in the resolution that council adopted, that the purpose of it is really to establish a diverse group of citizens and business interests that will identify potential barriers to overcome and solutions for redevelopment of the Caveman Plaza property located in historic downtown Grants Pass. The type of task force, limited term advisory, the resolution did reference the 14-member maximum, although council had some discussion about that and as to whether or not you needed to get to that point and providing some flexibility. We included in the resolution about a 6 to 8 month time frame, and then some special qualifications of who the council thought were really going to be helpful voices, if you will, on the task force, and the kinds of folks that would help to result in a product that you know, the whole city can kind of get behind. And those are listed there, everything from tourism, historic preservation, design, banking, etc. So you did on December 15th pass resolution 217128 establishing the task force. Volunteer openings were advertised, and there was an advertising or an application deadline of Friday, January 21st. We did receive, coincidentally, 14 applications. I don't know that I've seen that before. We said there was 14 member task force, and we got 14 applicants. Several of those applicants do have experience and background that align with some of those specific objectives of the task force. Others, I counted about 7 that I thought probably really weren't addressed at all. So that probably is something the council will want to discuss later on. There is some overlap of the applicant qualifications, particularly with historic preservation and downtown retail. We had several applicants that have some overlap in those two areas, as well as a couple of others. Again, the resolution doesn't really speak to that. I think that's really up to the mayor and council on how you want to kind of work through that representation and whether or not those other topics, those sectors that are currently listed in the task force need to be represented or not. Speaking of, this is the 14 sectors that we listed that are coming out of the resolution. Representatives from the Chamber of Commerce. And again, some of these are, you know, you can have one person that may fit 2 or 3. I mean, there's a couple of folks that applied that are members of the Chamber of Commerce who may be able to represent somewhat of their perspective. Then there's downtown merchants, Josephine County, somebody from the real estate sector, commercial and retail development, historic preservation, transportation, etc. So those were the categories in the resolution. And as I mentioned, I think probably about 7 of those are very clearly met, with another 7 not so much, including the youth, disabled community, housing, an architect. We didn't have any applicants for those categories. Here's a list of those that did apply to be on the task force. We sent you on Friday the full applications so you could see their statements that were included as to why they want to participate. I won't go down through all of these, but we were happy that we had such a good response in a relatively short period of time. So moving ahead, there's at this point a potential expense of $25,000 for kind of the core task force duties, and that meaning facilitating the task force, running through some of the deliverables that you'll hear from Martin here in a little bit. There's another $8,000 of additional services that they have proposed that would kind of benefit probably the task force, but wouldn't necessarily be mandatory in order for the task force to complete its work. But things like the design and actually having some visualizations of what some of those future uses of the property could be. That would be an example of the 8,000, as well as actually having a charrette or a design kind of focused meeting of several hours. We do have in community development's budget a professional services line item that has $43,900 fund balance right now for the rest of the fiscal year that we're in. And then urban renewal agency funds would also be a potential use, since the project, this site is in the urban renewal area boundaries. And we have a project that talks about, the revitalization of buildings that could also identify, as well as administration. So those are a couple of potential funding sources there, as well as some staff resources. So we'll have at the end of both Elaine and Martin's talk, we can come back to this slide, but I think your call to action is obviously at your discretion, but there's some alternatives up there about depending on how you feel after we hear from these two speakers. In terms of how we got to where we are today, we don't, as community development staff, have the ability to, in my opinion, effectively facilitate and staff this task force moving ahead within the next 6 to 8 months. And I think it's a priority for the council, which means we want to do this right. We want to do it thoroughly, and particularly when you have a potential design element. In my experience, it's very helpful to have visuals and to have experts who are familiar with the world of architect and design, urban layout, amenities, who can speak to that and can kind of help facilitate that conversation. So that's, I think, a real benefit to that. We also have, the opportunity to have a kind of a third party in such a diverse group, and will hopefully be a very diverse conversation and lots of viewpoints about all kinds of opportunities, what you can do with that property. I think having a third party who can kind of listen very neutrally and help to kind of guide that conversation is a benefit. So at this point, if you're okay, Mayor, I'll just ask Elaine Howard to kind of chime in and kind of speak to some of her background with the city, as well as some thoughts about the task force. Are you there, Elaine?
I am. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay. I'm Elaine Howard. Thank you for allowing me to be part of this discussion. As Brad said, I worked as the consultant for the development of your urban renewal plan a few years ago, and over the years since then have assisted the city with implementation of portions of that plan. I grew up in Grants Pass and graduated from high school there. I still visit often. I have a brother and his family who live there, so the city is very near and dear to my heart. And so I've always been very happy to participate in any of this planning. When Brad came on staff, he and I were just talking generally about Grants Pass and the urban renewal plan, and I volunteered that, to me, the most important developable site in your downtown was the Caveman Plaza, and that the future use of that site could be very key in how the downtown as a whole continues to develop throughout the future. And as I thought about that, and Brad and I were talking about the task force, I told him I didn't think I personally had the right skill set to guide that task force, although I have plenty of interest in it. And I told him I would think about, well, who would be the best person, firm to guide that from my history of working, long history, unfortunately, you can see, of working with cities across the state, and thought immediately really of Sarah Architects. I've worked with them on other projects and have followed their work across many localities, small localities, and have always been really impressed with their ability to work with people in the community to elicit the community's vision and then be able to grow that vision and make people see opportunities that maybe they didn't see originally, but given what they want to see possibilities. And I really think that's what you want to do on this site. It's, to me, extremely exciting that you're looking at it. And so anyway, I called my friend Martin and asked him if they would be interested, and they were, and I'll let him take it from there just based on what his firm does and why they have an interest in cities like Grants Pass. So thanks.
Well, thank you for that kind introduction. Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Can you hear me all okay?
Yes, Martin, we can. Do you have a PowerPoint if we have you share your screen?
Yep.
Okay.
That was my next question. I will cue it up. And then my next question is, can you see my presentation? First slide.
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. So again, my name is Martin Glastra van Loon. I'm a senior associate with Sarah Architects. I have been with the firm for 7 years now, and I am originally from the Netherlands, but I've been practicing urban design and planning in Oregon and around Oregon since 1996, January. So that is coming up on 26 years if my math is right, but it may be wrong. But it's been a while. So I'd like to take you through a short presentation where I talk a little bit about who Sarah is, who I am, and why we're interested in this work, and how we thought we would approach this specific challenge as it has been explained to us. And then we can open it up for discussions if there's any questions. So Sarah is a multidisciplinary firm. Technically, we operate under the name Sarah Architects, and that's what we're really known for, but we have several disciplines within our firm, not in the least urban design and planning. We have a large studio that does urban design and planning across the western United States, and does that for the public sites, such as cities and counties and regions, but also on the private side for developers and the like. We also have landscape architecture in-house, as well as interiors, and then of course the architecture group. What makes Sarah unique is that we're 100% employee owned, which gives all of us an incentive to be entrepreneurs and really look out for the interests of the firm as a whole, as we are always looking out for our own interest, because we really look for something that makes us grow and sustain our company for the long time. And we have been around for a while, since 1968. We have been in Portland most of this time, but since about 10 years, we have a presence in California with an office in Oakland. A little over half of our employees are female, and we are striving to increase our diversity. Like I said, we've been in business 51 years. Overall, the size of the company, we're approaching 200 staff members. of which 165 are design professionals. We also have a strong sustainability background and basis. So we have 58 lead professionals within our firm, and that is across those disciplines. I touched on this, the integrated disciplines, and integrated is really the key word there. We try to cross the boundaries that are conventionally sometimes drawn up between disciplines and specialties, and we like to bring those folks together in project teams to bring the best of each discipline to bear on specific projects to the benefit of those projects. So when it comes to this project here, our role, as we see it, is really going to be that of a facilitator. And facilitation means that we will be great listeners, we will be great conveners, and we will document and pull out those fears, but mostly hopes and dreams that the community has for this specific property. When Elaine first introduced this property to me, I was immediately interested. From my experience, I recognized the significance of a single ownership site of that size in downtown, such as Grants Pass, and I commend you for taking on this visioning exercise. And we're delighted to propose a process that can really hear from the community in terms of what is out there and what we can do with it to benefit not only the owner of this property, but also the community at large, be it the downtown or the grander Grants Pass city community. So with that, we have put or organized the schedule really around 5 task force meetings. That will drive our momentum and our rhythm of the process and the project, and we think we can get this done starting, if we were to start in February, in the next 5 to 6 months. We'd like to keep it a concise time frame so that we keep our momentum up and we keep people's interest high and we don't lose energy based on waiting or review cycles. You need a certain amount of pizzazz and energy to really keep this going and get to a result so that you can take that next step. So we have 4 steps within the process: site discovery, visioning process, project retrospective or sort of summary, and then the visioning memorandum, which is the last part, is the documentation of everything we've done. To start with the first one, the site discovery is really a story of us coming in and learning and listening and getting our bearings, and also bringing in some of our tools and presenting some of our tools. And I'll take you through this in detail here in the next couple of slides. The visioning process is really some of the fun part, where we start putting pen to paper and start drawing up some of the things that we hear and then elicit feedback from it. And then our final June or late June 5th meeting would be to come back one more time and say, did we get this right? And is this how you want your ideas and your dreams to be documented before we present it back to City Council in July? So here's that first kickoff meeting, number 1, during that discovery process. We would come in and work with staff to clarify the purpose of this study. We would work with the task force to get their bearings and establish with them their expectations of their engagement. And we would set a schedule and define that more clearly. And we'd appoint a chair and a co-chair and find somebody to take meeting minutes. And then we'd also establish sort of a code of conduct and how we will be working with each other throughout the project. Then we'd all look at the site in some detail. We'll present what we see as outsiders with our experience. But more importantly, we're going to invite others to speak to what they see for this site and its context. And that's where our listening will come in. And we'll ask questions about that. And then we will bring what we call an Urban Design 101 presentation. We've been doing work like this across the United States, West and towns big and small. And you know, every town has its own character, its own culture. That's what makes my job so interesting. I love that about it. But there are also some general universal principles of urban design in these downtowns that we'd like to share with you and see how they resonate in this culture and in this specific community. So we like to call it what makes a great downtown, and we have a list of items to go through and illustrate and solicit input on those in terms of what is important to you. The outcome of this will be a good understanding on the task force side of what the project is about and how they can participate. And then again, we're establishing a common language by bringing in urban design principles and a set of guidelines that gives people, the task force, tools to really participate into this process in a meaningful and pragmatic way, right? This project is not a city-owned project, it is a privately owned project. How can we guide and shape a community vision for somebody else's property and listen to that property owner as well and find common ground in terms of what we are all after and what role this particular project can play in the larger downtown. So we'll bring in urban design slide deck with precedent images and best practices, and we'll share that, and we'll do a high-level site opportunity and constraints analysis for folks to respond on, and we'll refine that as we move forward. And that could look something like this. Here on the left side is one of the principles or 101 urban design guidelines that we'll bring in. Compelling mix of uses. Let's cultivate that in the downtown. And then some examples of particular uses, and some of those are in the public realm, some of them are in the private realm, and we'll solicit feedback on that in a very graphic manner. And then on the right side, there's a mapping we'll do of the site within the context that will again document constraints, but also opportunities that we learn about as the project moves forward. And the document could be a map, an annotated map. Again, something to document what we learned, but also move that forward and build our recommendations on those constraints and opportunities. The second meeting then is one of visioning. It's the first of 3 visioning meetings, and the purpose here is, again, to open the mind and think of options for this site in terms of program, but also in terms of what the public space, the streets around it, could contribute to the site. Or maybe there should be a public space on the site. Quite often that's an idea that lives in communities. And if so, what kind would that be? And we'll dig in further on the urban design elements that we introduced in our first meeting and try to get more specific on what, again, what resonates with Grand Spas and the task force. And the outcome of this will be a series of vision boards with precedent imagery that will inform our site concepts, the actual site diagramming if you want, but we'll get a real strong sense of preferences in terms of what to carry forward and maybe what to leave behind from some of those ideas. So that may look like something like this. Again, boards with green dot exercise is something we often do, or a red dot if there's something you don't like, and we take groups through this and we collect a sense of where the sort of the consensus lies about what is desired and what may not be so applicable. And we'll have opportunities to have folks contribute their ideas on sticky notes, and we'll organize those and find categories. Typically we do end up with that, and we'll just again gather a lot of ideas and visualize that as much as we can with images. And we'll have lots of notes for sure. So then we'll come back after we digest that, and we'll come back for another workshop where we've taken that input from the first 2 meetings, specifically the second one, and we'll come back with some initial site diagramming concepts. And they will be high level, and they'll be annotated and illustrated again with some of the imagery. And this will speak about things like circulation, program elements on site or on the edge of the site, materials, aesthetics, character, and again, urban design elements that folks are interested in. And the outcome of this will be a set of high-level vision concept alternatives. So it's not just one, but it's numerous directions that we will further refine with the task force. And that could look something like this. And sometimes we literally draw them in these meetings, even if they're virtual meetings, because we won't get it right the first time. And that's not the purpose, to get it right the first time. The real purpose is to get as many ideas on paper as we can and test their viability across a larger community. And then meeting 4, we'll refine those concepts. We'll try to bring those back into a manageable amount of diagrams that the task force will mark up and provide feedback on. And again, we'll just hone in on other elements of the plan that start to really digest and bubble into a vision for the site. And the outcome of that will be a preferred, or 1 or 3 layouts of a preferred vision concept. And that could look something like the diagram on the left, where we in gray might outline specific development parcels within the site. We may decide that this is such a large site, maybe we break it in 2, 3 pieces, or maybe it's one large one, but we combine it with other elements that the community might be interested in, such as a plaza space, or a really nice street frontage, or little courtyards, or paseos, or anything like that. This is an example from a project we're doing in Bend on the left. And we may high level illustrate that with some quick sketches to give folks a sense of scale, of character, and the like. This is probably a scale that's maybe too large for Grand Spas in this particular example, but let's find out. We're not sure. And then the final deliverable is discussed then in our Task Force 5 meeting, where we take all the feedback on those previous concepts and we present a final draft deliverable. And this may be one scheme, or it may be 2 or 3 schemes if there's an open end to it, and that's fine as well. But we will take final feedback on that, and we'll annotate that, and we'll document all that. And the outcome of that will be a draft presentation to City Council and the property owner that will capture everything we've learned and everything we've heard in the previous 5 to 6 months back to City Council and the property owner. And that could look something like this. We're going to try to keep it very visual and light on words. We find that's the most effective way to communicate, but it may be a series of photos of the process, diagrams that we've used or created, maps we've created, the reference images that we've found, and perhaps an urban design framework like the one on the right that addresses some of the things that the stakeholders care deeply about. So that's our process, and I wanted to end with just 2 slides because you may wonder, why should we hire this firm from Portland to help us out with that? They're a long ways away, and what would their interest be in Grand Spas? Well, for me personally, this is what I do. Yes, I'm based in Portland, but I've worked across the Western United States, as I mentioned, in the last 25 years, and that's what I love doing. There are so many wonderful places across this landscape where beautiful landscapes intersect with a great sense of place and community, and how those communities relate to their landscapes and the rivers and their rail and their infrastructure, and how they build community within that is something that I have an inherent interest in, and it has propelled me to do work in pretty much every Western state here, from Washington down to California, and from Arizona up into Montana, most recently here in Bozeman, where I did something similar for a developer actually, but worked with a task force, a public task force committee as well, to find the common ground. And I think that's the essence of my work, is find the common ground between what a private owner or developer may have in mind and what the community sees and likes to achieve. And that common ground is very special if you can find it. And I pride myself lucky that I have been able to find that many times. And it is such a rush to be able to visualize a future that involves both the community and an owner of a property, and unlock potential and see a process get in motion where you go from talking about a site to actually building on a site and implementing a vision. So I'm delighted to help you with this. I don't have an agenda other than creating great downtowns across the Western United States. And I love getting in the middle of it. Hopefully we can do it in person, but most likely we will do it virtually. But you can count on us to bring a spirit of collaboration, big ears, and lots of ideas and inspiration. And that is my presentation. Back to you, Bradley.
Thank you, Martin, for the nice presentation. I have been a part of an event, a design event like this before, and I think it's a good process, and you've laid it out for us here. But council, do you have questions for Martin? Rob?
Yeah, thank you, Martin. I have a few questions, and I'm sure you're as familiar with this as I am. The speed of government is often almost immeasurably slow. Glacier quick, I like to call it. Yeah. So you have a schedule, and in some ways, from a government perspective, it seems very ambitious timeline. I'm wondering how many hours per meeting would you envision to be able to stay on schedule?
Yeah, we've scheduled this at 2 hours minimum per meeting. And some of the visionary ones we may go to 3. And we haven't talked about it, but in one of our additional services, and Bradley will help us get into this, if there is an opportunity for us to do this in person in Grants Pass, we would probably reorganize those hours a little bit to come to Grants Pass and have 1 or 2 days of presence in Grants Pass, where we try to meet with as many folks as possible and spend enough time on the ground to really get a grasp of the physical reality out there, and build some relationships that way. So that will redistribute our hours a little bit, hence the additional service, additional dollars. But you can't do this in an hour. 2 hours gets to be a little bit long for people's attention span, but when it comes to those visioning exercises, we may need 3 hours. And since they're very visual and interactive, with a lot of exercises and engagement, we think that will be a very doable time frame. Yeah.
So I'm not sure
in terms of your, excuse me, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I understand. So would your firm have someone physically present in Grants Pass at each meeting, or would you be doing this virtually?
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. I should have been clearer. So our proposal here is everything virtual, based both on, mostly on COVID, to be honest with you, and uncertainty about being able to meet and get everybody around the table. Also, there's a benefit to meeting virtually, because you do seem to get folks around the table a little bit easier. So that's what we've built our proposal on. We have included an additional service offer in our proposal, so that we may come to Grants Pass for, let's say it's the 3rd or 4th meeting, and for a small additional fee, we would do some of these meetings in person. So is that clear now?
Thank you very much. I have a few other questions, but if other people have some.
Rick, go ahead.
Thank you, Martin. So on a task force, there's different individuals with different personalities. Some are aggressive, some are quiet. Do you have a method of engagement for different personalities?
Very, very much so. Thank you. That's a great question. Actually went through the National Charrette Institute's training program quite a while ago, and they give you a certificate and everything at the end of it. And that is actually one of the items and issues we talk about quite a bit, and that I've been practicing getting over that barrier, because you're right, some people have no problem speaking up in groups. Others need to reflect on what they hear before they can feel certain to contribute, or maybe then they're even shy. So it takes a variety of people to guide these type of projects, but we got to make sure that everybody is heard. So we have several engagement techniques to get over that, and just one of the simplest ones, I briefly mentioned it, is to have folks write down their input on sticky notes or little notes. That's just one part of how we engage. We have other ways, follow-up calls or emails or what have you, but the sticky note levels everybody's volume if you want, and everybody gets to put their words on a board, or they can do it later if they need more time. And we collect and categorize that, and then it's important that we not only receive that and pull that out, but then we need to communicate it back to the entire group. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect is just the management and the facilitation of the large group and the small groups. We may do some smaller group exercises. That in itself is an engagement technique to make sure that more people are heard. Smaller groups allow, some people speak easier in smaller groups than in a large group, so that allows us to get closer to those folks. And then again, we need to represent back what we heard from everybody to the larger group, and it's on us to sort of balance out the volume and the level of aggression, and help the group sort out where they should be going.
Thank you.
Joel?
Thank you, Martin, for preparing the proposal, and just an observation, I don't know if it's true or not, but you seem like you're very intuitive in how you approach things, and there's not a lot of people that approach things that way from the intuitive start and the envisioning start. Of the projects you've been involved with, you've designed a lot of projects. Can you tell me what the percentage of those projects that have actually been implemented, and give me some examples of a city the size of Grants Pass?
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Such a great question. I wish I could give you a percentage. I cannot, but I can tell you this. Of my 25 plus years in Oregon, I have worked about 60% on the private side and about 40% on the public side. It used to be closer to 50-50, but in the last 7 years, I've shifted a little bit more to the private side. And as I've grown older, my personal and professional interest has actually been towards projects that get implemented. And one of the reasons for me to join Sarah 7 years ago was I had a feeling that I could achieve that personal goal, professional goal, sooner with Sarah, and I think that is true. We have a large network with the development community. They seek us out for buildings, but more and more they seek us out for our master planning capabilities of districts. So to me, there's a clear difference between planning and architecture, and quite often planning is so long range that it's really hard to see where that results in actually build projects like buildings and streets. But where I find myself is in between planning long-range plans and architectural or streetscape project realizations, and I overlap with both those sort of time frames, if you want. Planning is very long, 5 to 30 years sometimes. Architectural projects are often within the 1 to 5 year framework. I fill that gap. I can take big planning ideas and visions and pragmatically implement them into projects that can be built within a short time frame. I'm personally interested in that part because I would love to see some of the projects that I'm working on come out of the ground as I age myself before my retirement, which is hopefully still another 15 years off. But yes, things move slow in planning. So to get back to your answer, to the question, I can't give you a percentage, but I can give you some examples of projects where I'm currently working. One of the most interesting examples for me personally is the city of McMinnville. And I encourage you to speak with their planning director if you have any more questions. But back in 2010, I was part of a planning exercise, so long-range planning for a district called the Northeast Gateway Project, which is just north of downtown, but it touches on downtown. It's mostly industrial, but it was seeing some redevelopment happening. And the urban renewal wasn't there yet, but folks had a vision for that district that they wanted to put on paper, come up with a plan, and implement. And I helped with the visioning part of it. I did the plan, urban design plan, elements of that, and then we had implementation steps laid out for them, including rezoning, including thinking about urban renewal, including transportation improvements, etc. They went through those steps, they being the city after the plan was adopted. They passed a transportation bond measure, they rezoned properties, and they adopted an urban renewal area. And in 2015, I was hired, so 4 years later, I was hired with Sarah to redesign the street that I had identified in that initial plan as the sort of spine of the whole district that ties downtown with the rest of that district. And we redesigned Alpine Avenue, as it's called, as a festival street for the district. And we built it. We built it in a couple of years, and it's been open several years now. And since it's opened, that has led to more than a dozen private developments happening in that district, being spurred by that investment that the community made. So that's one very dear project to me, and it's from the public side. To give you an example, more recently, I mentioned Bozeman. Maybe that's one more example. There, I was hired with Sarah in 2019, so summer 2019. There was a property owner who had bought a medical facility that was about 3 acres large, similar size as this site, 2 blocks away from Bozeman Main Street. And Bozeman is a town, I imagine, a lot like Grants Pass in terms of size and character. They hired us after a similar pitch like this. They had worked with us on a hotel architecture, but they were intrigued with our planning and urban design studio. And we sold them on a process very much like the one I just shared with you, where we would work with a group of representatives of the community to find a shared value, a shared vision that would unlock the potential, a redevelopment potential of this site, but do it to the benefit of the community at large, the downtown, the neighbors, etc. That plan grew in size with some additional properties, and the name of that project is North Central. Got the name after we worked on that for a couple of years. It was just adopted by the city council last December, I think it was, after a 2-year process. And that's being built as we speak. The first phases have gone in for preliminary building permitting, and that's set to be completed in the next 5 to 10 years. So with 2 examples, I'm sorry I can give you a percentage, but I want you to know that I think that's where my niche is, exactly on that, making things happen and unlocking planning potential towards getting stuff built.
Thank you. Kurt, did you still have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Really excited about this, and I'm gung-ho, so don't take any of my questions as being negative, but
No, it's a good question.
I do suspect that this is more than council was thinking of when they voted in a task force. And so, you know, like I say, I love this, but I'm a sales guy and I love a good sales presentation. And so you got to get to the bottom line. I see there's a couple of add-on prices toward the back, but I don't see the price for the whole process.
Bradley can fill you in on that, but we're looking at 25,000 just about.
Great.
Plus the add-ons would be additional 8, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I had included that in the first set of slides, that it's different than what you got there. But.
Thank you.
Rob.
Yeah, hi, Martin. Couple questions. You know, I might be asking this because it might be a generational thing or whatever, but I actually believe that in-person meetings are a lot more representative and a lot more productive of what people actually feel. And, you know, you may be very comfortable remotely. I personally am not. I'm not really sure where the council's at on that or where this task force would be. But brings me to my question, if we wanted your services and had somebody here in person at every meeting, how does that affect the price?
So we've been heavy on, well, let me put it this way. It was explained to us that staff had very little capacity to facilitate this group and these meetings, so we have taken that on. In terms of having somebody on the ground, during the meetings that won't change much. Our organization and preparations for those meetings wouldn't change much. It would take a load off in terms of, but it's a small load in terms of communications with the task force members, the logistics, the meeting notes, etc. You know, I don't think it would affect our price that much. We're pretty tight as is. I'm just being honest with you. This is, again, we're trying to do it within a time frame for a reason. If we can keep this hot on our burners, we can be more efficient. If we stretch this out to 8 months, 9 months, it becomes much harder for us to be efficient and meet that price. So this is a pretty competitive price, I feel. But yeah, we can talk about some logistic support from the city that could bring that price down. When it comes to, you know, your initial lead into this meeting in person, there's no question about it. It's the best way to do it. I can only say that remarkably enough, I feel like we've been able to keep this interaction going despite the fact that we're all sitting at home. So it's a lot better than I thought we would ever be, and we've been doing this for almost 2 years now. So I know we can reach a standard that, at least from a professional point of view, is acceptable for me, but I would love to be able to come to Grand Spas in person and spend the time there just to, you know, absorb it all. Somebody else mentioned that I'm very intuitive. It's spot on. All my senses are open when I dive into these, and it's hard to feed those when I'm looking through a little keyhole of a camera.
So let me, I'm going to borrow a phrase from one of my fellow counselors, Joel. Let me make sure I understood you correctly. Whether or not the meetings were in person or virtual would be pretty much our choice and would not affect the price very much. Is that what you said?
No.
Okay.
Well, it depends on what price you're talking about. We have a plus an $8,000. So you include those two, then yes, for, what is that, 25 plus 8? For $33K, we'll be there. Okay,
thank you. The other, I guess, question or concern that I have. You know, for instance, this weekend, I spent some time, I guess, in your neighborhood, and I was able to both walk and bike along Alameda Ridge up in Portland, and you know, just amazingly gorgeous historic homes. Obviously, rich people of the day bought those homes. And, you know, this is our downtown historic district that this property is in. And I notice on your slide that, you know, while you say that, you know, you're really kind of into diversity and so forth, what I see of most of your pictures reminds me of, you know, Seattle or San Francisco, lots of glass, lots of steel. And I don't really see anything that represents anything close to our historic district, much the same as the financial district in Portland doesn't really represent what's on Alameda Ridge. So, you know, I just, I have a concern that of any potential, bias isn't the right word, but I have a concern that I'm not sure if your organization really understands so far where it is who you're talking to today and where we are and what Grants Pass and specifically where this property in Grants Pass is located, because I see no representation of any of that in anything that you've presented so far. So can you speak to that at all? Because it doesn't come through on the slideshow that you presented.
That's fair, and happy to. First of all, let me say that you're right. I know very little about Grants Pass, and I think that's the purpose of this project, to discover with you what really matters to the task force, to the city council, to the community about their downtown and this site. And it's that process of discovery that I can help facilitate, and that I'm a quick learn, and I will reflect that back. So what I will bring to the table by doing that is an outsider's perspective. Everybody, I'm sure, in your community has an opinion about everything, and they may not all agree. And I have no opinions of Grants Pass. And you can all convince me of what is most important, but I'm not there to have an opinion. I'm there to help you discover what you all want to do and what is the best path forward. So that's one. Second, you're not hiring me or Sarah to do any architecture. I want to make it clear that even though our firm is often referred to as Sarah Architecture, I represent the urban design and planning studio within that firm, and we do a lot of work that doesn't include architecture. In fact, it hardly ever includes architecture. I bridge the gap between planning and architecture, so I know enough about architecture to know what works and what doesn't, and I know enough about planning to see what we are trying and understand what we're trying to achieve and bridge that gap. So I wouldn't worry about the pictures, first of all, that I showed in terms of architecture. That is, you're right, it's probably not representative at all of Grants Pass. The last thing I want to say is Sarah is not, the architecture part of Sarah is, you cannot put that in a box. I heard you attempt to put us in a very Seattle, maybe Portland urban category, lots of steel and brick. If you look carefully at the work we do, you'd have trouble placing us. And the reason for that is that we practice something that we call contextual architecture, contextual design. And that's very important to us. So that is design without ego. And I hope if anything comes through from my presentation here today is that this is not about me, it's about you. So I'm a good facilitator. I can bring out what you guys tell me, but I don't have an agenda. I have not a dog in this fight. So same goes for our architects. They design based on context. They try to fit in. They have we have a great historic preservation and adaptive reuse list of projects. We get awarded for that. We get awards for that. So I'm not worried again about us in this project, A, because we're not going to be providing architecture, and B, if we were, I know what we're talking about, and we have that within the firm. So I hope that sets the record straight a little bit about Sarah, because you don't have to worry about that aspect, and plenty of our work takes place in historic districts. We're currently working on a streetscape project, the main street of McMinnville. That's a historic district, and we're being asked back there because of our good work there. The project in Bozeman that I just mentioned had historic properties around it. It's par for the course. Hope that helps. I hope I didn't sound too defensive either, because I didn't mean to.
All right, that was all of your questions, Rob? Okay, anybody else have questions? All right, I think we got all our questions answered for the moment. Thank you, Martin, for the presentation and answering everybody's questions.
Great. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to present to you and propose on this project.
Thank you. Council, we have a couple of items that we need to discuss. One is whether we want to move forward with the proposal here. And then the other we need to talk about a little bit later is committee interviews and applications. And so let's separate those two out and just talk about this process for a minute. Brian.
Yeah, I just had a question for staff. I would assume that the cost for this facilitation is below the threshold for which we need to go out for an RFP for.
You taking that, Mark?
Yeah, I am. I just had to adjust my glasses, which were steamed up. This would be a personal services contract, and so it would be below that. We can do direct appointment for this type of consultant.
You called that personal services?
Personal services, yes. That's perhaps a bit of a misnomer, but it's a legal term. So it would fall under the category of personal services.
Okay, I'll take your word on that. Thank you.
Other thoughts or questions for staff? Rick?
Is this time for discussion?
Yes.
Okay, Valerie and I have been involved with the MPO over the last 2 years, and when the online meetings started, it was very difficult, but I think as we've gone on in time, it's gotten much better, and one reason is everybody has a camera. You can still see the facial expressions on people's faces. You do have the ability to raise your hand and be heard. While it's not maybe the most ideal, I think as time goes on, it has actually worked quite well. The other thing it's done is facilitated people's, I would say, lack of flexibility on their schedule, but if they're out of town, they can still attend the meeting because they can just zoom in. So that actually has facilitated things. And on the timeline we're dealing here, I think it's important that the process keep moving fairly fast, and that would be an advantage. So I guess I could be willing to consider either option, on-site or Zooming. So that would be my impression. Thank you.
All right, Kurt?
Well, as he was going through the presentation, I was adding up dollars in my head. And so when he said 25,000, I thought, wow, that's a lot less than I expected. And so I think it's a good deal, and I think it's worth the extra for him to be down here. I think we need them to come down and see the district and understand what the project really means to us. And they said all the right words that mean that, but I would like to see them right here in town. And I think it's worth the money.
Valerie?
Yeah, I just want to go back to, and I guess maybe I would ask the staff. I mean, Elaine Howard gave them a high recommendation. And so I'm just kind of assuming, I just like to hear a little bit more about that, because, you know, I talked with Rob this weekend, and it was just like, I hadn't read anything yet, so I didn't know about it, but it was kind of surprised to suddenly see this without there being an RFP or that sort of thing. And I do understand time-wise, but I just would like to hear a little bit more about the work that she's done, or you could just vouch for her in terms of what's, you know, how long she's been working with organizations like this to get things done.
I'll answer part of the Elaine Howard part, being in the Oregon field here for 20 plus years. Elaine Howard is one of those staple names when it comes to urban renewal. She's been known and highly sought after as an urban renewal expert for decades, and well, for years. And so it's really exciting that we were able to get Elaine to be part of our urban renewal agency back in 2016 when we formed it. And I think part of that was also her personal interest in Grants Pass. Growing up here, we had the ability to get what I would say one of the premier individuals associated with urban renewal in the state of Oregon. So from Elaine's perspective, I value her opinion very much and respect what she's done in the past. Now, from a standpoint of why this architectural company, et cetera, I'll turn that over to either Elaine and or Brad. I'll start with Brad, and they can talk about that process and what we've done maybe to reach out to others. So this isn't just one. I think we did do some additional outreach. So I'll turn it over to Brad.
Yeah, so Aaron's right. When this came up as a high priority on the strategic plan for council, and being in the urban renewal area, we started that conversation with Elaine at that time. So the conversation just in general has been going on, and then I gave them feedback on Travis Boersma's comments here at the council, and how he perceives his role, and just sort of where we're at with that. The balance between the property owner and the community visioning, and that this is, there's no commitments on behalf of you, the council, or the Urban Renewal Agency board. This is purely an exploratory process. So I think we're all clear on that. In terms of CIRA, we did reach out, since we're in the procurement policy, the city of Grants Pass, we're under that amount where we can do as long as we get the 3 bids. And so I did reach out to 3 different firms. 2 of them declined, honestly, because largely the time frame. And it's difficult for a lot of firms right now to meet this. I think CIRA is of the size that they're able to do that, and Elaine's recommendation was coming out of her experience working with CIRA on several other projects that are downtown mixed use type projects. So that's kind of how we ended up.
Thank you.
This is Elaine. I can talk for a minute too if you'd like me to.
Sure, go ahead.
I first worked with Sarah Architects long before Martin was ever there, when I worked for the City of Portland's Urban Renewal Agency and worked with the principals who formed Sarah Architects. When I started my urban renewal consulting, one of my initial contracts on my own was McMinnville. And Martin and his group had been there, had done the kind of visioning for that Alpine Avenue, and I then used urban renewal as part of the implementation tool for that project. And as Martin says, that great project along Alpine Avenue has now been constructed. And I just went on the web and Googled Alpine Avenue, McMinnville, to see if there are pictures that you could access, and there indeed are. So after the meeting, if anybody wants to look at that. And the pictures, it's a little hard in context. Out of context, it's kind of like when you say, well, you can't really know Grants Pass unless you come here. So these pictures look kind of funky, but that's why they're great. It's an industrial arts area. It's kind of funky. It's perfect. What they did there was perfect for what the community was looking for. Sisters is another area downtown where Martin, I don't know if Martin was directly involved in that, but other people from his design studio were. And as you drive through Sisters to go to Central Oregon, there's that incredible streetscape and the stormwater management and the signage and the lamps. It is iconic, Sisters. Nobody could have done that better. I think that's one of the best streetscape projects I've seen.
And it's
then
a highway, it's a state highway too, which made it
yes,
extra difficult.
yes. And then a couple of years ago, I did some work in the little town of Cornelius, which is west of Beaverton. And Martin was on the team doing a downtown master plan of a few blocks, and I was doing an urban renewal plan of a larger area, where Martin did similar to what he has presented as the proposal here, worked with the community on their vision and incorporated, their vision into a document for the city that actually won national planning awards for that kind of planning within a small city and the vision that was created. And that was in Cornelius. Those are just three main projects, but over the years I followed their work in other communities, and it is just always top rate. So that is why I recommended them.
Thank you, Elaine.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, let's move back towards the council discussion here. Rob and then Joel.
Yeah, thank you, Elaine, for that. So I like to comment. I very much I agree with Kurt that I feel that the Sarah representative needs to be here in person. Martin said, that he felt it was, I believe I heard him say, he felt it was the best way to do it. The fact that they've never been here, I think, or didn't seem like they'd been here, I think it makes it really important. The other thing is I know that when we meet virtually, when one council member is not here and is on the phone or on the computer, I personally have never felt that I got 100% of what they were trying to communicate. When I have been in that position, when I've been the virtual person, I don't know that I've ever felt that I've been able to communicate 100% of what I had hoped to communicate. I feel it's much better in person. I also, the other thing is, and I'm sure we would all probably admit to it, if you're in a virtual situation, there's no guarantee that everybody who is there virtually is paying 100% attention. I mean, there's they could be going to the refrigerator, they can be taking the dog out, anything. So, and you don't know. So I actually think there's a lot to be gained by having the meetings in person. I think that anybody that we interview is just going to have to say, just like for the budget committee, can you make the meetings? Well, are you going to be able to make this schedule or not? Because if not, then just don't be on the task force. But I think that in person, I'm going to agree with Kurt that I think there's going to be just a lot more benefit. We're going to get a much better communication in our 5 or 6 meetings if we do it in person than if we do it virtually.
Joel.
So I've been fortunate in life and whatever, so that we go down to spend our dollars locally, and Judy and I eat in the historic district now and then. I know the people down there fairly well, where we go. They always ask me, well, what's going on? And, I just mentioned the hotel, that is associated with it and connected to it. And they were really excited. In fact, the response I got was, you tell me when I need to show up and I'll have everybody there to support it. So there's a lot of support out there, I think, to move ahead. And I agree with what Rob and Kurt said. You got to be in the same room. And hopefully this spike in COVID has occurred, and it's going to drop rapidly like it has in the other parts of the country. And we'll take measures anyway. And then we could also offer virtual, if somebody's sick or whatever, they can operate virtually, but the main meeting would be face-to-face.
All right, well, I've heard several people speak up in favor of moving forward with this process with a preference for having at least some, if not all of the meetings in person. I'm not hearing anyone say they don't want to do it, so speak now or forever hold your peace, I guess. Brian?
I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time to talk about how we're going to pay for it. Do you want me to wait for that until you get through this point? I was just going to ask a question because there was two options given in the presentation. There was a line item from Community Development Professional Services that has $43,900 in it, and there was an option for Urban Renewal Agency funds. So I think my question maybe is for either Aaron or Brad, as far as if we use the Community Development Professional Services funds for that, that's a majority of that line item. So how would that affect your ability to do other things for the rest of the fiscal year?
So at this point, we have one outstanding contract that would be paid through that consultant line item, and that's our wetlands project, which is well under, it's just a couple thousand left.
This truly is 100% usable urban renewal agency allocated resources. We have a healthy urban renewal agency. The impact that this would have is a direct nexus to that. So there shouldn't be any reservations about choosing the urban renewal agency to fund this study and this project. So that would be one option. And then to be able to provide for the additional flexibility that the other account has above and beyond just the urban renewal agency area and urban renewal agency defined goals.
Okay, great. So I heard Brad say that we could pretty easily use the funds that we've already allocated in the Community Development Professional Services line item. Philosophically, it makes sense to use urban renewal as a backup. It shouldn't be the primary. It should be if we need more, that should be the backup to me. So I would, if it's not going to hurt that community development fund, I would prefer to have it come out of there first. And then if we need to dip in urban renewal second, that would be how I would prioritize that.
Okay. So I guess at this point, we're going to presume that we're moving forward with this process. Does anybody want to make an argument against using the community development funds first? All right. Joel?
Well, Sarah, then there was the second topic of the committee itself.
Yeah.
You want to move on to that?
Well, that wasn't what I asked, but thank you. First, I guess are we good with the idea of funding it through Community Development Professional Services? Okay. Yes, we also need to address the committee appointments. We heard that we received 14 applications for 14 positions, and looking at the names, I recognize a lot of people and they look like good applicants. However, there is quite a bit of overlap in terms of, kind of expertise areas. And then we have some areas that you had previously identified as being areas that you wanted representation that are not represented. So I think we do need to have a discussion about if you want to reopen the applications and advertise it a bit more before we make a decision. Joel?
Well, I have mixed feelings a little bit, and it could probably work either way. As I get older, people look at alternatives, and either alternative can work. 14 people on a committee, that is about 296 relationships. And that's a lot for the facilitator to manage, having been there myself. And it can be done. The nice thing about 14 people, you broaden the public participation and the amount of people, and you get consensus, and then you have even more people that will support it. Usually, on effective committees, unlike the Public Health Committee, usually are about 5 to 9 people, because they have the number of relationships go from 249 down to about 70, so you reduce the energy to run the meeting by about 2/3. And but then you don't have the broader support that you probably would want in a project like this. The other just observation is there's some duplication probably that in terms of value added, you know, either participant could do it, having both of them there versus having the people that are representative of a certain interest group that didn't apply yet, and having that person present. So I just emptied my mind, and I'm willing to listen to what people want to do.
Thank you. I did have a question, maybe should have asked earlier, but I forgot it. I think if maybe Brad, or I don't know if Martin and Elaine are still on the line, but is there an opportunity in here for just the general public and the rest of the council, I think, to participate at some point? So the feedback is not limited to those people who are on the committee, and also whether they have any sort of recommendation for size of the committee.
So it's, just to confirm the clarity, it is a public meeting, it's a task force, and I think we'd run it similar to the advisory committees, where each meeting has an opportunity for the public to provide comments on the agenda items and have that discussion. So that would be part of that public outreach process, and just with a, you know, that's, unless we heard otherwise, that's the way we would run the agendas.
Okay, I just know in the past, like when I participated in something before, maybe, and he mentioned, you know, the green red dot exercise, that's something that could just be a large open forum, and that whoever kind of happens to be there that day could participate in. So I didn't know if that's what they have in mind.
I think we would, unless they're on, they would be the ones to really answer that. As a facilitator, I would see some potential difficulty with that if you were in the mid-part process of that, now asking people to put red or green dots somewhere where they may not have the full foundation of the rest of the task force. So it all depends on how they're facilitating that. I don't have the answer for that one.
Okay, I think my purpose is to get at the heart of how important it is that we really get a diverse group of people on the task force. Rob?
Yeah, Sarah, that's a good point. And basically, I mean, any task force that I've been on, the public's always had a chance to speak. It's not necessarily at any part of the meeting, unless they're invited, or unless that's what the chair or the facilitator might want, but they would have a chance to speak. To Joel's point, which kind of overlaps with what Sarah was saying, I think that if this task force was going to be a year or a year and a half, I think 13 or 14 people would probably be fine. I think that if we're going to actually have this thing be efficient and move along at any kind of decent pace, and that's the pace that we've set, it's a pretty short time period given the scope, I think that we need to pare down the number, because I think this number is unwieldy for such a short duration task force. There is duplication. I put it this way, I view it as being some duplication on many of the applicants, or some of the applicants. I can see one of the applicants that I would absolutely want to, if I were in charge of the task force, or my recommendation would be, I can see one of the applicants I would love to see giving that person 15 or 20 minutes in one of the meetings, but I don't see them as necessarily being integral to all of the meetings. I would definitely want that person's insight, but again, I don't see necessarily that person being necessary, or their experience and application didn't really, to me, scream out that they needed to be there the whole time. So I would like to see us pare this list down to somewhere no more than 9. And I think that'll allow us to move more quickly and probably go into more depth on some of these issues than have so many different people eating up minutes. Even though they can still come to the meetings as members of the public, they can still email the council, etc. But I'd like to see us pare this list down to no more than 9, and making it really clear to the chair and the facilitator that the public, of course, can speak at every meeting during whatever time period is set out for public comment. And I'd like to see 1 or 2 of these people maybe be invited to speak specifically, but not necessarily be members.
Valerie?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Rob on that one, because I do believe the same thing. You can get unwieldy. I do agree that there'll be a public input session, and, you know, all of that is welcome for people to give their ideas. What I see is lacking on here is some sort of financial developer or retail, you know, person. And I think that's an integral part of something that we need. Because I think you've got a couple things going on when you've got a project like this. You've got the dreamers who would like to get out and do something with somebody else's property, which we get. I mean, we all have our dreams, and that's important. But I also think you need the realistic, somebody on there to give, you know, the realistic finance part, or has done a development similar to this in the past and knows what is possible and what is not. So that's why I hesitate to just take the list. I wouldn't mind going out specifically looking for somebody in the bank or commercial development world to try to get that expertise on the committee, and then keep it to a 9.
Rick?
On the tight timeline we have on this, I think one other aspect that might be considered is if you have more people on the committee, you're going to have a better attendance factor, because you're always going to have certain people that won't be able to attend. And maybe one way of addressing that is you have backup positions. Instead of just one person in that slot, maybe you have 2 people, so if one can't attend it, the other person could. Thank you.
Rob?
Yeah, I think Valerie has a good point about the financial aspect of it, but that I also think could be a person that at some point, maybe the facilitator would be the one to make that decision, that we would reach out to one or more local bankers that would come in at one meeting and say, you know, gee, this is generally what we've been talking about so far, and then whatever financial questions we have, we could even give them the information before they come to the meeting, saying this is generally what we're going to ask you. Please prepare for us, you know, your view of this. So I think that having that perspective there would be great, but I think we could reach out to have a specialist come in for half an hour, one of the meetings, rather than have, you know, them necessarily being on the commission.
Joel?
I agree with Rob, so that the parts of the committee that didn't have applicants, that if they're needed, that they be invited to the meeting or somehow be allowed to give a presentation. The other thing being, he said he was going to come down and do interviews. And so when he comes down to do interviews, you know, he needs to interview that private sector. He needs to interview that general public. He needs to interview that Rogue Community College student, and have that perspective, and then see where that goes. You know, that's why we're paying him, to help gather our community consensus.
Vanessa?
Yeah, this has been a great discussion today. Thank you, everybody. I support keeping the amount of members that we have advertised for the task force. I think it's a little dangerous to say that 2 separate people can be duplicated, because no 2 people have the same life experience. I would like to see the committee reopenings for a few positions re-advertised. There are continuous voices that are missing from these discussions. I think Brad had said that it's a member of our youth community, disabled community, and an architect. And with those first 2 openings, I would, to advocate for them, I would like to see a hybrid attendance option, because oftentimes those 2 groups are the ones that may have the most difficulty with transportation issues. So I think if they did have that hybrid remote option, that may be able to help their attendance there. And I think that's all I have to add. Thank you.
All right, so we kind of find ourselves here with multiple different ideas going. One is to trim it down to no more than 9 people. One is to leave it at 14. We have reopening certain positions on the re-advertising for certain positions, especially is kind of on the table. We definitely had a strong preference for in-person meetings, but now we've heard a suggestion for hybrid. So With that, let's take a head count on how many people are interested in paring down to 9 task force members. So a yes means you are interested in paring it down. Kurt, or if you just want to raise hands, that's fine. So I got Rob, Valerie, Joel, Brian. 4 people want to, are you out there, DJ?
Yeah, I'm in favor of toning it down.
Okay, so 5 people wanted to trim down to 9. How many people want to re-advertise and see if we can get a different mix of applicants? Go ahead and raise your hand. Seeing Valerie, Vanessa, Rick, that's 3. DJ, are you interested in re-advertising?
No.
Okay, so I guess that means we will leave it as is with the applicants we have. We had, in a previous discussion, somebody had mentioned the idea of doing interviews for the committee. Normally, we don't interview for committees. We interview for these commissions that have kind of extra powers. So are you interested in doing interviews for this committee, or do you just want to make your decision based on the applications that we've received? Give you a minute to think about it. Did you want to talk about it, or you just want to? Okay, so if you are in favor of doing interviews, raise your hand. Nobody raised their hand. So we'll just stick with the normal process and select 9 people, and we can get that on an agenda later in February. Well, not quite this Wednesday's meeting, but we'll get it on the next meeting. Anything further that we need to tie up before we move on? Okay. We will have city staff reach out to the consultants and maybe tweak their process a little bit. I guess I would like to know a little bit more about the process for more community input or council's input. Seems like it would be kind of a shame to invest money in this process and just have it rely, you know, on nine people. So even though they are good applicants. All right, next up. Agenda review. We have a meeting on Wednesday night. Start off with a public hearing to consider an ordinance for landscape and buffering standards development code text amendment, the amending articles 22, 23, 25, and 30. There's some light reading in your packets. You'll notice. Guess we know what you guys will all be doing the next couple days. Public hearing regarding a property line vacation. Grab the address on that.
It's on Greenfield, northeast part of town, right by the freeway.
Kind of announcing it for the record here. Yeah, 420 Northeast Greenfield is the property there. Council action items would be a resolution to consider a soccer field recognition sign for the Dick Matty soccer field. Resolutions for the solid waste franchise agreement with both Southern Oregon Sanitation and Republic Services. Resolution awarding Ward Warren at 232 Northwest 6th Street a design grant, as well as 230 Northwest 6th Street a design grant. A resolution for an AFG Safer grant, a resolution for IAFF negotiations. A resolution to amend make an amendment for Allen Creek Road agreement with ODOT, a resolution for the deferred development interest rate, a resolution to confirm the hiring of a new city attorney, a resolution to approve the Boatnik contract, and a resolution for the Merlin Landfill Pollution Liability Insurance. Then we have appointments for committee members for COPA, that's the Committee on Public Art, the Historic Building and Sites Commission, the CEDC, Collaborative Economic Development Committee, and Budget Committee, and Sustainability and Energy Action Task Force. Whole bunch of people for that one. That's a new committee. Lots of appointments coming up this week. Questions about any of that? Valerie?
Yeah, I had a question, and I kind of got a chance to glance through it this morning, but not. Is the solid waste franchise agreements for Southern Oregon Sanitation and Republic, is that just basically a cleaning up? I mean, because that's how it's kind of advertised. This is just basically changes that we've made through numerous years have just been cleaned up and put forward. Is that basically what it is?
That's exactly correct. There's two minor changes which I'll highlight in my presentation, which involve COLA, which just changed the language related to COLA, and one other item. But basically all of the changes that have been made since 2000 have been incorporated into the document, whereas previously they just kept getting attached to the back as an addendum.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that.
Rob?
Yeah, I'm a little confused. At least on my copy, on the consent agenda, item D, it's got appointment of new city attorney. And did you just read that as a council action item?
No.
Okay.
It is on consent calendar on the one I was reading.
Yeah, okay. So I'd actually like to discuss that a little bit now, and I'd also like a little getting to the point of wanting a presentation on Wednesday night, at least a brief presentation. The reasons are a few. One is that our charter was changed in 2013 to say that that particular employee is treated a little bit differently than all the other employees that are in Aaron's charge. That employee is hired or fired with the consent of the council. And while I appreciate that I was at the interview process and I was satisfied with that process, and Valerie was there also, and I think she was satisfied with it, the other 6 counselors really know nothing about how that process happened, what the results of the process were. I don't believe that they could reasonably give consent to hiring this new city attorney because they know nothing about it. So I think that they need to hear about the process, about how the grading went or whatever. I think that needs to be discussed. And then beyond that, I also feel because the charter was changed in 13, again, hiring and firing with the consent of the council, I think that the council president should be at the city attorney's evaluation every year to take part in that. If any councilors have any issues, they can communicate that to the council president. But I feel that that's actually in the spirit of why the charter was changed, so that the council is basically kept very much in the loop of both the hiring, firing, and performance of the city attorney. So I feel that that's something that we need to discuss, and I think that's something that needs to be added to that, that position, is having the council president be there, because it's unlike any other employee. The city attorney does not work for the city manager. He works for the entity. Every other employee, Aaron could fire any one of his senior staff tomorrow and the council has nothing to say about it. But that position is different. And I feel that needs to be understood. And I feel that again, the council president should be at the evaluation.
Okay, I see that attorney evaluation process as being a separate issue for the purposes of Wednesday. Would you be satisfied with doing a starred item for the city attorney confirmation and having Aaron give an overview of the process.
Well, I think that Aaron needs to give an overview, but I think that just because you see it as separate, Augustus may not see it as separate. The person that we're hiring needs to know up front that we may be going in that direction. I don't want to be a month down the line saying, well, that's not the agreement that we created for Augustus, and at this point it wouldn't be fair to change his evaluation process. I think we need to set this slate clean right from the start so that everyone's expectation, councils, the person we're hiring, and the city manager is all on the same page before we actually hire him.
Did you have a comment, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly a presentation about how the process went, maybe a summary of the candidate's background is in order, just for transparency's sake. As far as how an evaluation would go of this person down the road, I mean, they won't even be officially hired until council gives consent and whatnot. I think that I would venture to say that their interest in employment here really has nothing to do with who would be in the evaluation in the future. And I think that if council wants to visit that in the future, that'd probably be the more appropriate time to talk about the nuts and bolts of the city attorney's evaluation.
I guess that's in line with what I was proposing, but Rob, if you're going to insist, we can have the council vote on whether or not they're interested in having that discussion under a council action before the city attorney confirmation.
Yeah, I just don't think, I appreciate Mark's opinion. I don't think he really has the ability or the authority to speak for the incoming attorney and how he would feel about a future evaluation. I think that person, it's owed to that person to let them know up front what the council may be feeling in the future, because really we have no one in the room right now that actually can speak for him. So I'm trying to be fair to all parties here, and also into the spirit of what the charter change in 2013 was trying to accomplish.
So I'm just going to add, I think that speaks to a bigger issue, and I'm not sure that that would be even correct under the charter to have a representative of council there during the evaluation. Council has, it's kind of like Supreme Court nominations. So the president appoints, the Senate confirms or denies the appointment. As far as ongoing day-to-day evaluations and whatnot, I still think that the city attorney is the city manager's employee.
Well, you're clearly entitled to your opinion. There's nothing in writing that's clear about that. And probably, the charter was changed for a reason. You probably know why. And again, I feel that to be fair to Augustus in the future, I think that the council president should be at the evaluation. I see no downside to that. And I see it standing basically or representing a checks and balances of the division of powers here, so that we basically don't end up in a situation that we had 12 years ago with too much of a concentration of power. Now you're in the fortunate position, Mark, of being an independent contractor, so you weren't evaluated by the city manager, and it's more clear that you work for the entity. It's not as clear for someone else who has to go for a yearly review, whose raise is based on what the city manager's opinion of him is. That's what I'm trying to get at. You're an independent, so I don't think that you really can have the perspective of being someone who has to essentially, please the manager, so to speak. You're in a more independent position, so you can please the entity.
Okay.
That's not going to be the future.
Rob, let's get back on track. This is just agenda review. We have an opportunity here, if council is interested in having that discussion prior to confirming the city attorney. If you would like to have a discussion during council action on Wednesday about the attorney's evaluation process, please raise your hand. So I'm seeing, okay. Let's put that under council action on Wednesday's meeting. We will have that be the last item on council action, and then we'll do a starred item on the actual confirmation of the city attorney's hiring. All right, is there anything further for Wednesday? Okay, the next week's workshop is kind of downtown focus. We have a Welcome Center economic development proposal. That is really about running the Welcome Center and how and who is going to run the Welcome Center. And city staff have a proposal for you to consider that would involve doing it in-house. Aaron, are we also going to have any information back from the chamber yet?
I've asked for information from the chamber. They said they were going to try and get some to us at some point.
Okay, so you haven't heard back yet at this time?
We do not have an official response back from our inquiry on the cost for them to do the Welcome Center.
Okay, so that's what that first item is about running the Welcome Center. The second item with the restrooms has to do with the actual building itself. Any questions? All right, are there any topics that you want to make sure we get on the agenda? Brian?
Yeah, I don't see that our minimum density discussion is anywhere on the agenda at this point, so I'm just wondering if we're still waiting on UAPC and where we're at with everything on that.
Yeah, Brad?
Sure. So we have an application finalized with the content as the council last discussed, and then we've advertised the Planning Commission public hearing. So at this point, the Planning Commission is going to hold their public hearing on the Development Code Amendment for minimum density, and then you'll have a public hearing after they make their recommendations. So we typically, I don't know that Karen has received the notice from Karen yet, but once we have a projected date for the hearing after the Planning Commission has it. And you're right, I don't think it's on here, but we would be able to project that. We can get that on there.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to get that on as soon as humanly possible. Thank you.
Yeah, it's on its way. Like I said, we've already advertised it.
All right, can we just at least add that to the back for now so that we don't lose track of it? Valerie?
Yeah, I have a question. I know that there's been an email as to banners across 6th Street. And I had a question, is if there's been a change that has come about to create this new discussion on the banners across 6th Street, because it also came up at the Community Economic Development Commission also had some questions, and they've had people concerned about it also. So my question to you is, has there been a change in the process from somebody, or is this just a change on interpretation?
There has been a change. The previous contractor was not following ODOT's policies, and when the city took over the banners, we realized that ODOT has specific policies regarding hanging banners because it is across a state highway. So we are now following their process.
So I guess my question is I guess I don't completely understand who is the contractor who was doing it, first of all.
Recreation Northwest.
Okay, so Recreation Northwest was the one that was approving them and getting them up and down, or taking care of that.
Correct, and they were not actually sending them to ODOT for approval, which is a requirement.
Okay, and that was the 30 days prior that we read that they weren't following, that there's a 30-day.
There was actually several. I would have to pull up the policy.
Okay, and I do know one of them in particular, and that's the one who made the email on, is the bikeways, is the ride for the rogue, ride along the rogue. And to me, that one kind of seems like a no-brainer because ODOT is actually has supported them in the past through the Mid-Rogue Metropolitan Planning Organization. So I don't know how we go about contacting or working with ODOT on this. Anyway, so it's just something I'd like to see brought forth. The ride along the road, ride the rogue, which is a fundraiser for the Greenway.
Yeah.
And I do know that Mid-Rogue Metropolitan Planning and Rogue Valley Metropolitan Planning have been supporting that for numerous years, and ODOT is on that committee, so I was kind of surprised that that one would have an issue. So I don't know what we can do with it or how we can go about changing it, or we can get it on to agenda to take a look at it. Because I do know that there are people, or I know this community, I mean, the Collaborative Economic Development Committee was going to put it on their next agenda because they were concerned about it as well.
Yeah, as Karen mentioned, unfortunately, we have previously been not following state guidelines and not reporting our banner activity to the state. We now are reporting our banner activity to the state. The state is now aware that we're doing the banners and that we're following their code and their policies that they've established. We have not put any additional layers of legislation on what is allowed as a banner. So we are following specifically to the word what ODOT provides for. And we can go in and provide you with a small memo if you'd like on the banner policy that can maybe help you. But for just an example, the Ride Along the Rogue, one of the policies is the event has to be started or housed within a 5-mile radius of the banner, Rogue River, and that event starts 7 miles away at Rogue River. And there's a number of other things that doesn't apply. So we can provide you a memo. There's unfortunately legislatively little that we can do because it's not our policy. It's the state's policy that we're just administering, and unfortunately over the years we have not been administering it properly. So we are trying to get into compliance with the state's guidelines for banners.
Okay, and I guess my last question was, the language was endorsed, or I can't remember what it was. Sponsored by the city. So what exactly does endorsed mean? What's the criteria for endorsed?
Yeah, I think this is we're getting into a conversation of actually talking about the topic. And again, I can give you a memo or we can do something along those lines to get you some additional information on the process of banners across 6th and 7th Street.
Okay, if you could do that, that'd be great.
Yeah, if you could just get us some more information, that'll give us a good starting point. Okay, are we done with agenda review? All right. How about we have a motion to adjourn the workshop and convene the special council meeting in executive session? Vanessa.
I move to adjourn the workshop and enter executive session.
Second from Rick. Thank you. All in favor of adjourning the workshop?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All righty. The council will now meet in executive session for the purpose of discussing those subjects previously noticed for this executive session, which is to deal with real estate property transactions and negotiations. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.660 and more specifically under the subsections of that statute which have been publicly noticed for this meeting. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically requested not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. At the end of executive session, we are not expected to reopen today, but we will reconvene at 6 p.m. Wednesday evening. And with that, let's take a 5-minute break and start at 2:50.